Welcome to episode 114 of the Girl About the Globe podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be talking through some steps on how to plan a solo trip. So if you want to get away this year in 2024 and you're unsure how to plan a trip, this is the episode for you. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Girl About the Globe, a podcast for you, the solo female traveller, empowering women to travel solo with maximum adventure, minimum impact.
Solo travel is honestly one of the most liberating and empowering things that you can do for yourself. You get to decide what to see and do, and you've got no one else to answer to. In my opinion, it's one of the best ways to travel. But if it's your first time travelling alone, you may feel a bit overwhelmed because there's so much information out there, and you may not be too sure how to actually plan your trip. So that's why I wanted to record this podcast episode, just to talk you through some steps and hopefully eliminate that overwhelm. These are all the steps that I use to plan my solo trips. Ever since I've started solo travelling, there are many more resources on the internet, which does make it even easier, but sometimes there are too many. Okay, number one, the first thing you need to do is decide where to go. Is there a destination that's at the top of your travel wish list? Maybe there's somewhere that you've always wanted to go. Maybe you've wanted to see the Christ the Redeemer statue in Brazil, travel around Thailand and see their amazing beaches. Or maybe you just want to do a Europe trip and you want to just do some city and sightseeing or go to New York and see famous landmarks. Decide where you want to go. If there isn't a particular destination that comes to mind, consider what you want to get out of your experience. That is a really good way of determining which country to visit. So, for example, maybe you love history and you're eager to learn all there is about ancient architecture, and you might want to go to a country that's known for the ancient Silk Road, like Central Asia, for example. Or maybe you just want to soak up the sun and you want to just escape work for a week or 2 weeks and just read, and that's your idea of a perfect relaxing solo trip. So you're looking at beach destinations instead. Maybe you're looking at partying in a budget city, or even a sailing trip around places with amazing islands. So decide what experience you want to have. There is an article for this on the blog that goes into a lot more detail to help you decide exactly where to go. But when you have decided where to go, check the season, especially if you're going to the Caribbean. So check it for hurricanes. And if you're going to Asia, also check it for the typhoon season, even though I have travelled to Asia during the typhoon season and it was fine. Or if it's summer or a peak season such as Christmas, then the destination will generally be busier and more expensive than if you choose to travel during the spring or autumn, fall months. Then determine how long you can go for. So maybe you just need a week away at, say, a yoga retreat somewhere in the mountains, or you want to do the sailing trip, or you need a whole month off backpacking several countries on one continent, such as Southeast Asia or South America or Central America. Doing something that you feel really excited about will make your trip unique to you, and it will also make sure that your trip is exactly what it needs to be. My tip, once you've decided where you want to go, is not to book anything yet, because you might change your destination depending on these next steps of the process. Step number 2 is checking your passport and your visas. So when you're deciding where to go, it's really important to check the next couple of steps that I'm going to tell you about, because you may have to change your destination if you don't have enough time, especially if you're looking to go away last minute. First of all, check your passport. You normally need at least 6 months left on the validity of your passport. So make sure that it's still in date or that you have enough time to apply for a new one. It can take about 6 weeks or up to 6 weeks, depending on where you are in the world, to get a new passport. Then check if you need a visa. Some countries are visa-free, depending on which passport you have. A Singapore passport is one of the best ones to have, apparently, and even on a British passport, I can travel to a lot of countries. Others have e-visas that you can apply for online, so you don't necessarily have to go down to the consulate in your country and apply online, which can take longer. e-visas seem to be a lot more common nowadays. There are still a few countries where you have to apply weeks or even months in advance, so checking the visa will determine whether you're able to go in the time frame that you want to go to. And if you've chosen a challenging destination to go to, then you might not have time to obtain the visa, especially if you want to travel last minute. Step number 3, check vaccinations. So depending on where you're visiting, you may also need to have travel vaccinations, especially if you haven't had them before. I always have the common vaccinations, so hepatitis A, typhoid, polio. If you're travelling to Africa, you probably will need actually to get your yellow fever vaccination, which now lasts a lifetime. When I initially had it done, it only lasts 10 years, but now you can get it for a lifetime. That comes in a little yellow card that you have to show to generally immigration when you arrive in an African country. So check which vaccinations that you need and make sure that you have enough time to get them before your trip. So if you don't have enough time, you may want to choose a different destination where you don't need any vaccinations or you don't need any additional vaccinations to what you already have. Step number 4, plan what to do on your solo trip. So by now, obviously this is a very quick summary, but by now you probably would know where you're going to go and you know that you have enough time for any visas and vaccinations. So now you can just plan what to do when you're there and choose activities that interest you. There's so many different activities now that you can do. If you like food, you can do food tours, culture tours, history, party bar crawls, so much that we can do now, which is fantastic. And whilst being spontaneous, which I generally am when I travel, is always part of the adventure, doing some research before you go can really help you make the most of your time. You don't want to miss out on seeing things that are on your travel wish list because you didn't plan ahead and you didn't book the attraction. So if you're going somewhere really popular, for example, like New York or Paris or Barcelona, you may want to have days where you pre-book the Sagrada Familia or the Empire State Building or the Louvre, just to make sure that you can definitely see it when you're there. Last thing you want to do is go to a destination and not be able to see what you really want to see because you haven't booked it up front. I always use Get Your Guide to help me plan a trip. So I just look up the best things to do in the destination that I'm going to, and then I just include them on my itinerary. I generally group things in different areas, so if there are a few things in a certain area of a city or a country, then I plan my trip accordingly to those different areas and things to do there. Then I always make sure that I have at least one rest day a week if I'm going away for longer than a week. A, you don't know how tired you're going to be after sightseeing and you may need a rest. And then B, there might also be additional things that you hadn't thought of when you're there that you also want to see. So it gives you a little bit more time. And you can also get skip the line tickets for the museums or the main attractions that I just mentioned, like Sagrada Familia, for example. Those skip the line tickets are worth it because you then don't have to waste hours standing in a queue, especially if you're only in a city for a few days. Step number 5, decide where to stay. So when you think about where to stay, it's a really good idea to consider your budget. If you're only planning to go for a short trip, then you may be able to splurge on some luxury and treat yourself to a hotel or a beach resort. If you're worried that you're not going to meet people on your trip and you want it to be quite sociable, then maybe stay in a hostel instead. They are cheaper, especially if you stay in a dormitory room, which is a shared bedroom. They also have private rooms as well, so you do get your own space, but you still have that social element. Generally, hostels offer tours and social activities, especially things to do in the evening, which makes it easier to meet others. When you're choosing your accommodation, make sure that you just check some reliable sites for reviews, not only for the hotels, but also for the areas that you're located in. You may want to be near a train station or a bus station, or if you're staying at Airbnb, just make sure that you're picking a place that's got lots of good reviews. While it's a great option for affordable accommodation in expensive cities generally, at the end of the day, you are spending the night at someone's private home. So you may prefer to stay in a hotel, for example. Number 6, check how to get around. Once you've decided what you want to do and where you're going to stay, you need to look at how to get around. Obviously, if you're just going on a beach holiday and you want to spend a week lounging on the beach, then you don't need to check that. All you need to check is how to get from the airport and back to the airport. But if you're planning on a city break, then you could work out the metro or buses to navigate your way around the city. Check out city passes too, because they may save you money if you're planning to travel a lot. Some of them do offer free transport as well as skip the line or discounted entry to some of the city's famous attractions. If you're going to be staying in more than one location, check how to get from place to place. I always use Rome to Rio. It's such an amazing resource and it really helps me plan how to get around. It's free. You just basically put in where you're going to be. So say for example, Abu Dhabi to Dubai, and then it gives you different options from buses, trains, ferries, taxis, and the prices, and you can actually book through the websites that it links to. So have a look and see if there's any public transport to get from place to place, or whether you may need to hire a car or even a private driver. That is quite common in some countries. You may also want to pre-book a transfer from the airport to your accommodation, especially if you're arriving in the evening. I always do this now. And then I generally get public transport back to the airport because it's so much easier to find public transport going to the airport than coming from the airport to where I'm staying. You can always just contact your accommodation to see if they can arrange a transfer. There's also a service called Hopper, which I recommend for solo female travellers. You can always ask your Airbnb host as well. Some of them also do pickups for an extra fee. So don't book anything yet. These are just the steps for you planning. Number 7 is checking flights. That's if you're going abroad, obviously, and not travelling domestically. But then if you are travelling domestically, you may want to compare train prices via flight prices. If your trip isn't until months away in the future and you've got plenty of time before you go, then I recommend signing up for a travel alert on Skyscanner. What it does, it notifies you on the flight price when your date that you're looking for goes down and also up. So if you see it going up and up on a daily basis with the email that it sends you, then it's probably time to book it. But it's also quite good if you're flexible with your dates. You can also look at flying into one airport and out of another to compare the costs, especially if you're planning to travel overland. Number 8 is actually booking everything. So now you're ready to book your trip. I know how overwhelming it is because there's so many different sites. So I'm just going to recommend the travel sites that I use to book my trip. Or if you've decided, okay, this is too much, there's too much I want to see, too many places I want to go to, I don't know how to organise the logistics of this, I don't know where to stay, for example, then maybe consider a group tour instead. And I've got a list of all the solo female friendly group tours on the blog. For travel planning websites, I recommend Skyscanner for the flights. Accommodation, I generally use booking.com. I mean, there is Airbnb and there's also Couchsurfing. There's also trusted house sitters that you might want to consider, which is cat sitting, dog sitting, snake sitting, any kind of pet. You can just basically apply on the platform for a house sit and then you get your accommodation for free once you paid that annual fee for the platform. Tour companies, the one that I always recommend is G Adventures. I really love them. They're really recommended from people in our community as well. There's also True Travels, which is part of the same group, and they are more for backpackers, so they're more budget trips. Day tours, I recommend Get Your Guide and Viator. And yoga retreats, there is a platform called Book Yoga Retreats. I've actually booked 2 through this. It's very easy to use and they have just yoga retreats all over the world. Number 9, get insurance. This is the boring part, but it's really important to purchase travel insurance for your trip, even if you only have medical cover included. I know some bank accounts or credit cards do offer free insurance. You can check that and make sure you read the small print, because sometimes it's not usually comprehensive enough for your trip. Check how much excess you would need to pay if you have to claim. So generally, the higher the excess, the less the premium. If you're planning on doing adventure activities, they're probably not going to be covered with your credit card or your bank. And some insurance companies don't cover skiing or trekking higher than 2,000 metres as a standard policy. I generally add on extra cover for my laptop and my phone if it's not covered. And the travel companies that I recommend are True Traveller, World Nomads, and Safety Wing, which is more of a nomad insurance. Step number 10, get packing and get any travel products that you may need. Now is the exciting part where you can plan what you want to pack. The general rule of thumb is pack everything that you think you need and then half it. So I always take too much stuff, but if you just want to take hand luggage and keep the cost down for baggage, then take everything that you need and then go through it and be ruthless and just end up with half of it. You can mix and match with different colours and different clothes. Don't forget to also pack for the season and take extra layers or a jacket if you're going to be travelling somewhere cold. You may also need to buy extra items like a travel towel, comfortable working shoes, or a plug adapter. I use a universal plug adapter that's covered me for every single country I've been to so far. It just saves you buying separate ones for Europe or the US. You might even need a new backpack or suitcase. So I do have all of these covered again on this article on the blog. Number 11 is to check cultural norms. Especially when you travel solo, you don't really want to offend the locals or do anything wrong in the country that you're travelling to. And sometimes there are different laws that you wouldn't even think of. So for example, if you jaywalk, so you don't cross on a crossing in Dubai, you can get fined. Or if you point your feet towards someone in Thailand, it's actually considered rude. So they're really important when you're travelling solo. And you can just read up about the cultural etiquette in the country just to ensure that you have a better trip. Last step, there isn't really a step, it's just get excited and get tips from other solos. By this stage, you're probably feeling very excited and also nervous too. And it's perfectly normal to feel both of these emotions before going on a solo trip. I still get them. Just because you've decided to book a solo trip doesn't necessarily mean that you will be alone when you're there. There are apps and groups where you can gain tips from other solo travellers, like our Girls About the Globe Facebook community, where you can just ask for advice or just share where you're going to see if anyone else has been there. And then just count down and start getting excited about your trip. There's obviously so much more you can do, is research how to meet others, what to do alone at night, and just how to get a bit more empowerment for your solo trip. All of these steps are included on an article called How to Plan a Solo Trip on the Girl About the Globe blog. I will put a link in for this, and each section it gives you some useful website links to look at as well. It goes into a lot more depth. I've just covered a brief summary of how to plan a solo trip here. But I hope that it's helped to reduce the overwhelm and just see how kind of easy it is to book a solo trip. And if you do need any additional help, don't forget to jump into the Girls About the Globe Facebook community and ask for your help there. And that's it for this week, and I will be back next week. In the meantime, safe travels.
Thanks for listening to our Girl About the Globe podcast, making solo travel easier for you. Find everything that you need for your solo travels at girlabouttheglobe.com, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.